કે આવશે અહીંયા જ છે.
Yes, Sachin, I'll make you the host again.
Yeah.
Just a moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Sachin, Dr. Sachin.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, few more may be joining again, so you'll have to let them in.
I will start sharing the screen.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Should I wait? Should we wait for 1 or 2 more minutes so that if somebody has logged out, then they can?
Yes, yes, yes.
I think we can start, right? Should we, or should we wait for 1 or 2 more?
Yeah, you can start. There are people in the meeting. About 20 participants are there in the meeting.
Yeah.
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 There were 32 before, and now there are 20.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
So we were discussing those shoes that I mentioned, yeah. So these are the shoes, and as I've been saying that these shoes are not the shoes that you wear. You don't wear them, because when you wear it's equipment. It's the equipment-ness that's how you relate to the shoes. But these shoes obviously are not wearable, right? What they do is they reveal themselves, and they reveal the world of the wearer who wears them. Okay? It may be a peasant, it may be the artist himself. And the world is that of his hard work, his perseverance. And Heidegger imagines these shoes to be worn by female peasant, and how hard she has to live her life. Her struggles are reflected in these two shoes, the kind of quality these shoes have, right? So the kind of shoes that you can see reveal the hardships as well as the optimism of a farmer, a peasant woman. That's the world that is revealed through these shoes. Yeah. So that's what we were discussing. And he calls this material aspects of the work from which the world is set up related to concealment as refusal and dissimulation, as we have been discussing about nature of truth itself. All right, that is what we have been discussing. So this material aspect, like colors, like tone from which somebody makes a sculpture, or sounds from which you make a song, or whatever. These are the material aspects, and you won't find, if you look at color palette, then you won't find those shoes there, right? So the materiality of from which it is made, the canvas, right? If you look at canvas, then it won't show you the shoes. And if you look at the colors, the material from which it is made, you won't see the shoes, right? So these shoes are unconcealed from those things which are not, which don't reveal the shoes, right? So there is certain amount of resistance to unconcealing, I'm sorry, right? So there is a resistance to unconcealing that is happening, and there is also unconcealing that is happening whenever truth occurs, according to Heidegger. And in the work of art, the truth sets up itself to work, right? And he calls this material thing which refuses or resists unconcealment as the earth. That's the term he uses, the earth. So the setting up of the world, setting up of the earth and setting up of a world are two essential features in the work being. And work being is distinct from thing being. Right? And as we go back to our primary inquiry, when you look at a canvas, painted canvas, then we relate to it as if it's a thing, right? It's an object, but it is not. Its work being is something that unconceals this world of a peasant woman from something which refuses. There is a conflict going on here between things that show up and things that refuse to show up, or they show up in some other forms. So there is a strife, and that's the term Heidegger uses between world and the earth. So this is what he has to say. Truth happens in Van Gogh painting. This does not mean something is correctly portrayed, but rather in the revelation of equipment being of the shoes, that which is as a whole, world and earth in their counterplay attains to unconcealedness. They are revealed. The world is a self-disclosed, this is how he defines world. World is the self-disclosing openness of broad paths of simple and essential decisions of historical people. It's about decisions that the choices that we make, decisions that we make in everyday life that decide our world. The world is made up of all those decisions and the paths that we take as human beings. And the earth is the spontaneous forthcoming of that which is continually self-secluding and to that extent sheltering and concealing. So the world of shoes which is revealed also sets itself back into the materiality of canvas and colors. So it emerges from the canvas and colors, but it goes back. Because if you go out to touch it, then you won't find shoes, obviously. You will touch canvas and the colors, right? So it goes back. So this earth and the world are at interplay. One reveals itself and one secludes and conceals itself. Truth is present only as the conflict between lighting and concealing in the opposition of world and earth. The conflict is not to be resolved in being brought forth for the purpose, nor is it merely housed there. It's not just housed in that painting. The conflict, on the contrary, is started by it. So truth starts this conflict. In the strife, the unity of world and earth is one. So there is a strife and this unity is one. So we have come a long way from thinking of work of art as a form and content unity. Right? That we have been, we always think of form and content being united dialectically, the classical Marxist formulation of art. Right? So you've gone from epistemological the formulation of what is art to an ontological formulation of what is art. Yeah. Can I request Sushant Jha ji to please mute your mic? Can you please mute your mic? Mr. Sushant Jha ji, can you please mute your mic? Okay. So work being as it starts, the conflict between earth and the world contains the essential traits of the conflict. So work being is different from thing being of work of art. The thing being is something that is tangible or that you hold. But the work being, when you lift that painting of the shoes, a pair of shoes by Vincent van Gogh, which will cost you millions and millions of dollars, and you pick that up, it's the thing being. But that is not the work being. Work being would lie in the conflict between what is revealed and what refuses to reveal, between what is showing up and what it goes back into, something which he calls the rift. It's not, rift is not merely cleft, ripped open, but it's an intimacy in which opponents belong to each other. It's the basic design and outline sketch. So truth establishes itself within a being that is to be brought up only in a way that conflicts open up in this being. This being is the work of art. This being is itself brought into the rift design. And this rift must set itself back into the heavy weight of stone. Say, for example, a sculpture of, say, for example, Poseidon that you pick up in your hands, it's stone. But it's not stone, it's the god that you have picked up, right? So it's not an object, but at the same time, it's the world that is revealed. But it's still the stone. It goes back into it. Dumb hardness of wood, the dark glow of colors, as the earth takes the rift back into itself. This strife that is brought into the rift and thus set back into earth and thus fixed in the place is what he calls a figure or a shape or the gestalt of art. And this gestalt is the, is the marker of work of art being created. And it's different from being made. You make shoes, but you create this painting. There is a difference. And what is that difference? That createdness is this mark of this conflict between the world and the earth. The strife is written all over it. So in contrast to all other modes of production, the work is distinguished by being created, so that its createdness is part of that created work. When you make shoes, then how the shoes are made, that is never highlighted. When you wear those shoes, they disappear into functionality, utility. But in painting, that materiality stays, that createdness stays, and it stands out from him. And then he makes a very important point that this doesn't mean that it's the work of a genius, a very romantic individualist idea that has entered Western art theory and hence modern art. And he goes on to say that the artist and the process are, where it is unknown, how did all this happen remains unknown, then this is the point where it is really great. So if artist can explain how he made that work of art, then it's very unlikely that work of art will be important. It has, because it's the truth that sets itself to work. It's not the artist who has created it. So here Heidegger is attacking probably another important foundations of Western aesthetics, and that of subjectivity of the artist itself. And that is replaced by being, of truth, or of Dasein. And this is the last point, and I will stop here. And the essay is extremely complex, very argued at length, and rich with insights. But given the constraint of time, I will restrict myself to some of the important points. And this is probably one of the most important points, and probably one of the most important point ever made, right? So he says that all art as letting happen of the advent of truth of what is as such essentially poetry. What does he mean? That all art is poetry. And what does he even mean by that? For that, he says you need to revise your understanding of what you mean by language in first place. Our understanding of language is a thing, an instrument, like the shoes, right? It's instrumental, it's being, but we never think of the being of language. So in current view, language is held to be a kind of communication. It serves for a verbal exchange and agreement, and in general for communicating. But language alone brings what it is as something that is into the open for the first time. Language brings things into existence. This phone, this laptop, this PC, this wall, this car is brought into existence when there is a word for it. So by naming, language, by naming being for the first time, brings their beings to their being, from out of their being with capital B. So somebody named it, and that's how it came to be what it is. So this very fact of naming is what language does. So such saying is a projecting of a clearing in which announcement is made of what it is that beings come into open as. Poetry is the saying of unconcealedness of what is. Language itself is poetry in its essential self. So all arts for Heidegger are poetry, and language itself is poetry. Why? Because it brings something into existence. It unconceals, like the shoes unconcealed themselves in that painting for you, right? And that is when you name them that they come into open. By open, he means that space in which Dasein exists as well as the things exist in their beings. So this open, this clearing, into that clearing, the things are brought forth. So so language is not just a tool for conveying information, right? It's not equipment, it's not a thing, but as a way of as a being, it is something that projects, announces. So somebody said that I will send person to moon, and that's how we went. That announcing creates that space for bringing the thing forth as possibility. So that is what Heidegger means. So these are some of the important ideas in that very densely argued essay. Many of the arguments which look like digressions are actually digressions because he has discussed them in his other books. But for that essay to be self-contained, he has to bring all other ideas into it. So he has discussed at length what is thingliness of thing or what is truth. In fact, he has a book called The Essence of Truth, right? And so what he does is that he tries to bring in all his research into that single essay. And it's a kind of essay that was written from 1935 onwards in pieces, in various lectures. So these are some of the key ideas that the essay talks about, right? So one of the important things that maybe as a summary, you can say that instead of epistemological way of looking at art as a thing, you are trying to approach it from ontological perspective. And for that, he is trying to destroy the existing ontological theory, which says that the being of being is being. That is the entity itself. But the being is something that precedes the presence or absence of that thing, which makes the experience possible for us. Right? So it is not yet thought. It is a mysterious domain from where the things come up. So being is that mysterious space. And very often he says that pure being is pure nothing, with capital N. Right? So his idea of being as something, not an object, but a precondition for an object to exist is something that is radical and very difficult to grasp because we are used to grasp things, right? Not being of that thing. So this is where I want to stop here for today. And again, want to thank all of you for giving me chance. And I would love to have questions and discussion around this topic.
So then, according to him, art is truth. Art conceals.
Right. Art is where, truth sets itself to work. That's how he defines it.
Right.
Art is where truth sets itself to work.
Okay.
Because truth means unconcealing, right? It's not an object. It's not correctness.
Right. Okay. So in a way, we can say that the artwork is truth. Art is truth or artwork is truth. What could be?
He's trying to distinguish what is that makes a work of art, right? What is it that makes that what you paint on that canvas, what it is, art, right? What is it that makes it art? Now, it's not the shoes, obviously, right? So it's not the thing.
So do we expect truth from art? Can that be said that way?
Truth is definitely, but truth not as true.
Okay.
True would mean that sun rises in the east is true, right?
Okay.
But truth is the essence of true, which means it's a precondition of truth, that sun has to show up in certain way and a proposition has to come in front of us. Then we can say, oh, they match.
Okay. Right.
Right?
Yes.
So that showing up is what truth is.
Okay. And hence
So
art
it can also mean untruth. It can also mean falsehood. It can also mean dissimulation. It can also mean something which refuses to show up.
Okay.
Right?
Right. Thank you. You can take
Yeah.
some other.
Sir, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, uh, as you said, you gave an example about black holes, right? What is a black
Hmm.
hole? And for that, the black hole has to show up.
Hmm.
Actually, in the specific case of a black hole, they were discovered by theorizing them, and they were
Why?
theorized. Actually, first of all, Einstein theorized that something like this would exist, and even before that, around 1890s, they were theorized. But we knew about their existence only around 1950s or something.
Hmm.
And can we say that Heidegger was pointing out that we can know about the being of something by knowing that what makes its being, like Einstein and scientists, all of those, they understood what was present in the cosmos, and
Hmm.
by applying mathematical equations and stuff, they realized that something like black hole must exist, otherwise the universe won't function as it is functioning right now. And therefore they theorized that, and after some time we knew that okay, they really exist by giant telescopes and findings of astrophysics. So can we say that Heidegger was pointing out that being is a function of the other, that we like if I want to recognize a phone that is in my hand, then I have just named it. From tomorrow, if the whole of humanity agrees that what we call phones, let's just call them a book, and the whole meaning will change. So can this this is the hermeneutic paradox, that
No, no. So what
uh,
you have to get here is if something shows up, right? It's not necessarily that you experience it with your eyes. It means that you detect it, right? You may detect it using various tools. Eyes are also tools. Detect it using mathematical tools, right? So mathematics as apparatus for detecting or making sense of world detected those black holes first, right? Just like Einstein detected that the light bends around the sun uh, or the moon due to gravity, right? That was mathematically proved, and then empirically people verified it later, 50 years after Einstein's death. So I am not merely talking of empirical detection. I am talking of detection as it you detect it mathematically. It has come in. It is unconcealed, right? But it's in the math. For example, time travel or whatever equations of quantum mechanics are, they exist in mathematical domain, right? And empirically, they make absolutely no sense. So they have shown up in mathematical domain. How can something be both wave and particle? Or how can your way of detecting something affect that? Right? The uncertainty principle or whatever is goes, or what do we mean by entanglement? All this makes no sense in our commonsensical understanding, but in mathematical sense, it does make perfect sense, right? So something shows up in our mathematical language, right? So in mathematical language, that object was first named as maybe some mathematical equation. And then people then translated it into everyday language. And then they used the word black hole. And maybe then when we made far more sophisticated telescopes of all kinds, then you detected that object in the space, right? So you have to distinguish between empirical detection or detection of something has already shown up for you,
yes, sir. I
but it's
mean,
in the domain of
I
mathematics.
was not pointing out at material existence. I was pointing out at all existence. Like an idea also exists.
Hmm.
Like I thought something, and where it is a function of electronic and chemical functions in our brain, but still it exists. And
Ah.
what I meant was, is Heidegger actually questioning that? Not that what shows up. He questioning that why does it show up?
And also it's connected to the question of presence, right? Uh, What is presence is also something that he is complicating by saying that being is something that is a precondition to both presence and absence. So something exists only in mathematical domain, right? In mathematical formulations. Now, is it present? It's not present in our empirical sense, but in another sense it exists. So what do we mean by presence or absence? But fact remains that it has been unconcealed, right? It's unconcealed in the
Yes,
mathematical
and
domain.
is it
Hmm.
is it that the limits of language prohibit us from knowing it?
Yes,
Because
because our
language
language,
as
you are
modern
very true.
linguists.
Right, right. So very true. That's why our language is around our world. That's why we can never understand what is synchrony or quantum entanglement, or what is talked about in quantum mechanics cannot be translated into our everyday language, which is made on Newtonian world that we experience. Right.
Yes, sir. And it's like
So you need a specialized language in which you make that clearing to declare, announce its unconcealment. And that specialized language can be mathematics, as in the case of black holes or the examples that you are giving.
or even if we come back to very to our world, not even like quantum mechanics, if we see that an Indian speaking Hindi cannot fully understand uh, somebody from South America, or because of the limits of language and those things. And
Yes,
we
yes,
still haven't proved about Chomsky's generative grammar theory, that every grammar of each language has something in common. Well, that is not proved, so we can say that we cannot fully understand each other.
right. That is the Sapir-Whorf thesis that we talk about in linguistics, that Eskimo language has 50 words for describing white shades of snow, right? And they see all those 50 shades, we don't. Why? Because in their language, those things are unconcealed, and our language, they are still concealed. So translation very often becomes an attempt to unconceal something that exists in another language. Yes, anyone else has questions, observations, comments?
Would you classify, what do you define as knowledge in art?
Yeah, Shreya, yeah, a bit loudly.
Yes, sir. What do you define as knowledge in art?
Huh. So knowledge, if you look at what you mean by knowledge, is very often thought out in terms of epistemological mode. Like knowledge is about, say for example, how to repair a cell phone, or knowledge as about things, right? So knowledge as ontological phenomena is something that is completely unexplored according to Heidegger. And that's why he is trying to break this epistemological framework based on a flawed metaphysical ontology, right? So we make a distinction between epistemology and ontology. And when you talk of knowledge of art, what do we even mean? When you see these shoes, what knowledge do you get? That knowledge you may say that they are shoes by somebody's peasant. Now that is information, not really knowledge, right? You just see those shoes. But ontologically speaking, you discover the world and how it is unconcealed by the artist, or it happens in that work of art, right? So Heidegger is trying to transform what we mean by knowledge of art itself. You cannot talk about, yeah, these shoes are made of this and they are broken and they indicate poor persons or something like that, right? So knowledge through art is something that he is trying to bring back to fore. Probably whole question whether whether art can give knowledge was debated heatedly. We have 10 more minutes for this. So heatedly by Plato and Aristotle, as you may be aware, that Plato denied that the world that exists, the existentia, is real, right? Only the essentia, which is forms, is real. And that's why painting of the world is one more move away from reality, and hence invariably falsifying, right? So Platonic philosophy of art would see art as falsification, mimesis, which Aristotle tried to rehabilitate. So what Plato is saying, art does not give you knowledge, it gives you wrong knowledge, right? And that's why you have to stay away from it, basically. It's falsifying. So Aristotle tried to revive it. So these are the debates that have happened in epistemological domain of art. And Heidegger is operating outside of these domains, right? Telling you knowledge is something else. Like say, for example, when you ride a cycle, it's not that you have memorized the rules of riding a cycle, right? You ride a cycle. It's not consciously, you don't do all that. In the beginning you may, but once you get the balance, there is knowledge which is of ontological kind, not epistemological kind. So he's interested in ontological dimensions of the knowledge that artwork gives. I don't know if I've addressed your question in some way. Yeah.
Hello, Sachin.
Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, please, please.
When we teach in the class, we are also teacher, I am also teacher.
Maybe
When
a
we
bit
teach in the
louder,
class,
please.
when we teach in the class,
Ah.
when I teach in the class, I teach skill-based courses. So when I am showing, telling something to the students, this is done this way. This is the way it has to be done. So that's an information. So how do we share knowledge through information? At the same time, when we are sharing the information, how we can incorporate knowledge in that information?
That's a very interesting question, because Heidegger would say that craftsmanship is what you can teach, right? The craft. What cannot be taught is how well can the things unconceal themselves. That happens on its own. Truth sets out itself to work. In some way, he's moving away from the notion of art as craft or skill. He's moving away from that, because skill and craft is required to produce objects, things.
Okay.
But artwork is a being of work of art. That is something else altogether. So how will you teach people to paint like Vincent van Gogh, right? If I knew that I would pay you as much money that they pay for that painting,
Right?
right? Because art, it has to be, we have to think of art beyond craft.
Right. Correct. Thank
So
you.
is art teachable at all remains a very profound $1 million question.
Right.
And one point I would like to add, because you have raised it very interestingly, we have only 6 minutes. And Heidegger says, he quotes Hegel, who says that art is now dead, in the sense that it no longer holds the primacy it had in some period of time. Art has become marginal, it has become entertainment at the most, it has gone to the fringes. So art no longer reveals the truth of the spirit that Hegel mentioned. And Heidegger in some ways trying to address this problem by trying to bring back art into the question of ontology and spirit yet again. In some way trying to restore the importance of art in the study of philosophy, as well as, and trying to go beyond art market oriented idea of art as an object.
Right.
So he's trying to, in some way, at least rescue art from marginalization that is happening. That is his attempt.
Right. I think that's a good attempt.
Any other queries or observation? We have 4 minutes with us.
Last question, if anybody is not asking, may I ask?
Yeah, please, please.
uh, it is about not directly connected with this subject, but say some art only. It comes under fine art, music. Say when these theories can they apply? Can it apply to music also?
See, we have 4 minutes. Yes, this is a very interesting question. We have learned to think of theory as something that can be applied to some object, right? So theory itself is built on an assumption that art is a thing, which is
हाँ,
object. And Heidegger is questioning this very belief, assumption that art is a thing. It is truth that is unconcealing, and there is a struggle that is happening, strife, which it captures, right? So Heidegger's theory is also questioning of this very idea of theory of knowledge, which says, "अरे ये Marxist idea है, चलो इसको art को apply करो, Freudian psychoanalysis है, इसको apply करो." As if art और ये चीजों को apply करने के लिए कोई चीज है, object,
हाँ,
right? So he's
Right.
questioning the theory of theory itself. Theory as something, because it's built on the assumption that art is an object, right? So he's
Yeah.
questioning the theory of the theory itself.
Yeah.
So
The questioning of
So
theory
that's
of knowledge also there.
right,
हाँ,
basically that, but also art.
Yes.
Sir, so in a way, does he challenge Plato's hypostatization of, Plato considered he considered metaphysical domains as real. That was his mistake. Even the Neoplatonists and all the other people also pointed, even M.A.R. Habib pointed out that, he hypostatizes everything. So does Heidegger, and it dominated Western philosophy for 2000 years. And does Heidegger challenge all of it?
He is not dismissing art, is he? Like Plato did. So it's not a Platonic
Sir.
attack on art, it's an attack on knowledge. It's an attack on aesthetics. It's an attack on metaphysical foundations of all knowledge systems that we have built upon. Right? So he is actually trying to bring art back to the center, closer to the center of our civilization, rather than push it towards periphery. Because these knowledge systems, which tend to treat art as an object of consumption or experience, they tend to marginalize it in many ways. So
sorry
he
to
is
interrupt.
questioning that. Yeah, there is only 1 minute left.
Yeah. So let me thank you before the meeting ends abruptly. Thank
Right.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you on behalf of all of those who have joined, and thank you on the behalf of MIT that you accepted the invitation. And we have got a different
Yeah, it was a
view
pleasure.
together on the not only art but questioning the
Yeah, and you can share my email ID for if your students wants to have a more detailed conversation on the topic. Then
Sure.
that's what you can do.
I will surely share it.
Yeah,
You
thanks a
have
lot.
last minute to yourself now, Sachin. Again, yeah, you can
Yeah.
go.
thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Sajin. Thank you,
Yeah.
Dr. Sajin. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, you can go
Thank you,
ahead.
Nanda.
We have little time, so it can be utilized.
These are some of the books that if you are interested in, some
Okay.
to
Yeah.
start with.
So, can you share your presentation then maybe? if
Yeah.
Later on, you can share the presentation. It was a totally different take on the knowledge itself. So it is difficult to digest for sure, but something interesting to know also.
Because we are trained to look at knowledge in a certain way,
Yes.
and he is trying to restructure or destructure, in his own words, deconstruct, and that's the word that Derrida takes up later on. But
Right.